Hello everyone, I hope you're doing good. If yes, that's great. I'm Bhavi, and in today's video, we will look at the history of psychology, and we will not just look at the Greek philosophers, we will look at many other perspectives. Yes, Greek philosophers were important, but we will talk about many more perspectives that existed in psychology, especially in the history of psychology. Now we will talk about why do we need to study the history of psychology, because before studying psychology we always discuss this topic. So this is the first topic that is there in your entrance exam, in your colleges, in your universities. We talk about history and then we talk about many theories that happened. But we also talk about history and we emphasize on history the most, and I'll tell you why. So if I talk about the history of psychology, then we need to study history of psychology, because according to Hermann Ebbinghaus, who gave the forgetting curve, if you do not know about him, it's okay, but if you're from psychology background, you would know that he gave a theory related to forgetting. So we will talk about Hermann Ebbinghaus, and the quote he gave. He basically, first I will tell you who he was. He gave the forgetting theory in memory chapter in psychology, and he said that psychology has a long past but short history. It means that psychology has a long past. We often talk about things related to psychology, human behavior, cognitive functions, and many more things. But it is a short history because psychology emerged just 140 years before. So before 140 years, people did not know the concept of psychology, and before 140 years, people did not know that psychology is a separate discipline. So it became a separate discipline when William Wundt opened his first laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. But it is not that old, it's just been 140 years ago. You might think 140 years is a lot, but it is not. So only 140 years ago we discovered that psychology could be a separate discipline. I hope this is clear now, and we can also highlight this, that psychology has a long past, because we talk about human behavior, we talk about soul, memory, learning, dream, behavior for thousands of years. So we can say it has a long past because we did not label it psychology, but we labeled things that are related to psychology. So we said that we need to study the soul, we said that we need to study the memory, we also started talking about learning, dreams, and behavior. But we say that yes, these things were important, but these things did not contribute to psychology. These things did not make psychology a separate discipline. It became a separate discipline after William Wundt. Now, when we are studying history, because I've already mentioned, we need to study the history and then we can come to other theories. So, why do we need to study the history? Even in entrance exams, even in colleges and universities, they emphasize on the history first. So, first is who said or did something. So, here you can see that who said or did something is written, because if any theory is given to us, we will first figure out who gave that theory and what he actually did. Second, we need to study the history of psychology, because we need to know if this thing happened, then where and when it happened. So, year and the place, like, yes, laboratory was open. So, we're studying, and that is why we are knowing this fact that he opened his laboratory in Germany. So, where is Germany, Leipzig, and when in 1879ish around. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I think it was 1879. So we know that okay, this is the person who did it. He did at this place and at this particular time. So that is why we study the history of psychology. What school of thought the idea belongs to? Because in psychology we just don't have one school of thought. We have plethora of schools of thoughts. And we also go from ancient Greek philosophers to Middle Ages and Renaissance, because we don't study about it enough, and that is why making this video. And this is a very important class. So again, we know that psychology was, of course, not an English word. It came from the Greek word psyche, logos, the study of soul and the mind. So you know this thing, and physiology and medicine, especially in 1800s, showed how nervous system and brain work. When physiology first happened, it actually showed how our nervous system and how our brain works. So it was, of course, not a separate discipline. It came from physiology. We also see biology. We also see different parts of different topics in psychology as well. So psychology, even though it is a separate discipline, we are still including different things. We are still including physiology. We still study about biology. We don't entirely study about human behavior. Just like that, we add different things to it. We add biology to it, we add also philosophy to it, because right now in this video we will be talking about philosophy. So we can say even now, when it is a separate discipline, it is combining physiology and it is combining philosophy as well. Psychology was born when these two streams, philosophical question and scientific experimental methods, met in 1879. So we know 1879 में विलियम वुड ने अपनी खुद की पहली लेबोरेटरी खोली थी, जिससे साइकोलॉजी एक सेपरेट डिसिप्लिन बना था लिप्सिक जर्मनी में. And now we also know that psychology was not an English word, it was a Greek word. As I've already mentioned, psyche means soul, mind, and logos means study. So when you study about the soul, when you study about the mind, later it was disregarded. It was not, I don't know, it was of course disregarded, but it was not welcomed. Yeah, welcomed is the right word. It was not considered a good definition, even though psychology word was right. The breakdown of that word was right, because this is actually a Greek word, and when you break down these words, psyche means soul or mind, and logos means study. So when you study about the mind, you study about the soul. That is the correct breakdown of this word, because it's from a language. But if we really look at this word, if we really look at this definition, because we are making a definition out of this word, which means that psychology is a study of soul and mind. Mind we understand, but soul we can't see. So it literally means that the study of the soul slash mind. So we can't see the soul, and that is why it was not welcomed, and that is why it was disregarded, because it said that you cannot see the soul. So it shouldn't be the correct definition. It shouldn't be considered as a definition, because first of all, you can't see the soul, right? And now this is your part one, where we will talk about the ancient Greek roots. Right? It happened from 600 BC to 200 CE, and here is the starting of the psychology subject. So it is called the pre-Socratic thinkers. Now there was a person who was called Socrates. I will discuss about him later on. But before him, during 600 to 450 BC, this period of psychology was called the pre-Socratic period, pre-Socratic thinker. So before Socrates, so Socrates was a Greek thinker. So before him, there were many important figures that we want to talk about. So before Socrates, who was a Greek thinker, a group of Greek thinkers, because here we are also talking about Greek thinkers, but specifically Socrates. So Socrates was important, but before that, there were so many Greek thinkers that happened, and it was around 600 to 450 BC. You don't need to remember this. I'm highlighting it just for you to look at it and remember this a little bit, not that much. He and what happened during this period is that he tried to explain nature and reality without relying on myths about the gods. So you know Greek mythologies, Greek gods, you know about Greek traditions. So when pre-Socratic thinkers happened, there were a bunch of thinkers. They said that we should not rely on gods. So we should definitely not rely on gods. We should not uh, only depend on God. So we can't explain everything because of God. We can't put everything on God. So basically, pre-Socratic thinkers said that we have to also look at the nature and look at the reality without being dependent on the God. I hope that is clear to you. And they're important to psychology because some of them were first to ask what the mind or soul is made up of. So they wanted to actually know that psychology is of course made up of mind, of course it is made up of soul. So they wanted to know that how psychology is actually made up of. So they also started questioning everything. They also started questioning Greek mythologies, the gods that were there, because they did not believe in God. They did not explain every phenomena just because of God. So they did not disregard gods. They just stopped emphasizing everything and stop relating everything to God. That if anything is happening in our nature, in our reality, it is happening because of God. So basically, they put less emphasis on God, less focus on God. Then there were a bunch of people that we want to study about here, and we should study because if you're preparing for your M clinical psych, it will be important. Then we have Thales of Miletus from 624 to 546 BC, and he was the first philosopher in pre-Socratic period. He argued that water is the basic substance. He called it arche. I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it is called arche, whatever. So he basically said that water is the basic substance. So he basically focused on water, and he called water as the basic substance, underlining everything, including the soul. He basically said that water is very important, and everything that happens is because of water. And if I explain it in the dumbest way possible, then he basically said that every soul is dependent on water, and water is a basic substance. So in short, what you have to remember in this is that water is the basic substance, and Thales of Miletus said that. Now we have Heraclitus basically happened from 535 to 475 BC. You don't have to remember these dates. You don't really need to focus on these dates. Famous for the idea that everything flows. So this is again the Greek word, that says that everything flows. He basically said that nothing is permanent, nothing is everlasting, nothing will last you forever, nothing is long lasting. He basically said that, and he said everything will pass away after some time, everything will go away after some time, everything will destroy after some time, you will die after some time, you're not permanent, you are not on this earth forever. And this is an early idea about the constant psychological and physical change. He said you will change physically, you will change psychologically, one day you are happy, maybe next day you are sad. So it could be because of his theory, Heraclitus, and he said that everything is flowing, nothing is permanent. So your psychological state, your physical state will keep on changing. You're right now young, you don't have a lot of wrinkles, but when you get old, you will have a lot of wrinkles on your face, and it is absolutely normal because nothing is forever, nothing is long lasting. Just give me a minute, please. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to charge my laptop. It's only 44% charge. I just didn't see it properly. I thought it's 54, but still, it's not enough charge. The battery drains very quickly. Hold on. Okay, so now it's charging. Yeah. So let's talk about Pythagoras. Pythagoras, you might have heard about him in your maths class as well. If you have maths or if you remember a little bit about maths, then he said that soul is separate from the body. Now you have to understand dualism means that body and mind are not aligned with each other, they are separated from each other. So he believed in dualism. Now, this is important. Maybe I'll highlight it again because it is important. He believed in dualism, and he said that mind and body are separated, and he also said that reincarnation is very important and it is existing. He believed in reincarnation, that we will born and transmigration of souls, your soul will be migrated into someone else, so it is called transmigration. And he also said that mind and body are separated. So basically he believed in dualism, and this was his first thought. Pythagoras said that dualism exists where mind and body are separated from each other. And then we have Alcimon of Croton. He's again from 500 BC, that you have to remember. And let me explain you this. Yeah, so a physician who is credited as one of the first to state that brain, not heart, is the organ of sensation, thought, and intelligence. Now, Alchemia was the first person who said that if anything is happening, if any sensation, thought, intelligence is happening, it is happening in your brain. It is not happening in your heart. So he said that maybe you're feeling something. It is because of your brain. You're feeling love sensations. You're feeling love for someone. It is happening in your brain. It is not happening in your heart. It is not happening in your heart, it is happening in your brain. So if he emphasized on brain, he was the first person to explain that brain is doing everything, heart is not responsible for that except pumping the blood. Brain can't do that, but heart can pump the blood, whereas brain can only be responsible for sensation, thought, and intelligence, as I have already highlighted it with the blue highlighter, so you can see it, you can mark it, it is important. And he sometimes called an early fortuner of physiology साइकोलॉजी फिजियोलॉजिकल साइकोलॉजी के अर्ली आपके फाउंडर हैं, बिकॉज इन्होंने बोला था कि सब कुछ ब्रेन करता है, कोई हार्ट नहीं करता, हार्ट सिर्फ ब्लड को पंप करता है, बट जो भी सेंसेशन होते हैं, जो भी थॉट होते हैं, जो भी इंटेलिजेंस होते हैं, वो आपके ब्रेन में होते हैं. सो दैट इज़ वाई वाज द फर्स्ट पर्सन emphasized on the physiological aspect of sensation, thought, and intelligence, and that is why he was called the first founder, and he was also the first person to explain brain and the importance of brain. Now we have Empedocles. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Again, you don't have to remember the dates. I'm not going to say the name of these dates, the years, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So again, we have after Alcmaeon, we have Empedocles, and he said that everything is made up of four roots. He said everything that you see around you is either made up of earth, water, air, and fire. You might have even remembered the four human theory by this. If you are a psychology student and if you have studied Greek philosophy, you would remember that there was this theory by Galen, and it was a theory about four humors. So it also said that everything is made up of, every kind of personality you see around you is either made up of earth, water, air, and fire. So it is very similar to that, and I've already mentioned it here. This idea later shaped Hippocrates' theory of four bodily humor, and Empedocles said that everything that you see around you is either made up of all these three elements or one of these elements. And then we have Democritus. Democritus, again, along with his teachers, Leucippus, proposed Atomism he proposed, and he basically said the idea that everything including the soul, so he basically again emphasized on soul, and he said everything which is also including soul is made up of tiny invisible particles called atoms. So he basically said, and this is a little scientific as well, because he said everything is made up of atoms, which is true. Everything around you is made up of atoms, including the soul. He said he included the soul, and this was an early materialist view of the mind. It was an early materialist view of the mind that everything is made up of atoms, everything is made up of invisible particles, very small, tiny, minute, invisible particles, which are called atoms, and he also included soul in it. So you have the quick summary here. Pythagoras, you can remember by dualism, because he said soul separate from mind, and Democritus said, I'm not sure how to pronounce the names, I'm really sorry for that, but remember it, okay, that materialism he gave the concept of, and he said because everything is made up of atoms including your soul, it means that everything is same. So again you can read it, soul made up of atoms, same as everything else. So just like the things around you, soul is also made up of atoms, so soul is no different from the things that you see around you. And now we have Socrates. Now, this period included these important philosophers, the Greek philosophers. Now we have Socrates. It happened from 469 to 399 BC. And he said Socrates left no writing of his own. We know his ideas mainly through his student Plato. So, you know Plato, and I'm assuming that you all are from psychology background. So, Plato was basically a student of Socrates. So, we study about Plato, we also study about Socrates, and Socrates was a teacher basically of Plato. And then he said his most famous contribution to psychology is not a theory of the mind, but a method and an attitude. So, here we will talk about a method and an attitude that he gave. So, he said, Know thyself. Know thyself means that, first of all, this is again the Greek pronunciation and the Greek word. I'm not able to pronounce it properly. So, he gave a method and an attitude. So, he said the first thing, know thyself. And again, it's an old English, so it would be a little different. So, know thyself basically means he believed that self examination and self knowledge were the beginning of wisdom. He said that if you are able to examine yourself, if you are able to test yourself, if you have the self knowledge, you have the self awareness, you would get at the top of the wisdom. You will get a lot of wisdom, at least even if not, if even if not a lot, you will at least get a little bit of wisdom, because you are able to test yourself, which is called self examination, and you are able to know the knowledge that you have. So self knowledge, so self examination and self knowledge will give you wisdom, it will make you wise. And he also talked about self awareness and introspection. He also talked about introspection, the same method that William Wundt was talking about in voluntarism and Tichnerin's structuralism. So again, he talked about introspection. He said that you sit with your thoughts, you examine your thoughts, and you do self assessment of your thoughts, and then you also get self aware because of it. So he gave two modern concepts, self awareness and introspection. Then Socratic method, dialectic. Now this method is very famous, and for CUET PG as well, it is very very important. Now, a method of teaching through structured question and answer. So, Socratic questioning will happen because it will test how good you are with your self examination, good you are with your self knowledge, and good you are with your self awareness. So, Socratic method basically is a kind of method where the questions will be asked to you, the answers will also be uh, uh, you know they will be telling you to answer the questions that they will be asking you to. So basically Socratic method said that you have to know self examination, self knowledge, and self awareness, and then what will happen, the questions will be asked to you, you will give the answers of those questions, and it is called the Socratic style therapy. Now it is also known as cognitive behavioral therapy. It is a part of cognitive, and it will include your behavior as well, the way you are asking questions, the way you are answering questions, and it will be uh, checking your cognition, your behavior. And in old times, it was called Socratic style therapy, which is very similar to CBT, where a therapist asks guided questions to help a client examine their own beliefs. So here you will be able to examine your own beliefs. I hope that is easy for you to understand. I hope it is not something that is too difficult. However, I think I have made these notes a little short and brief, so it will not be that difficult. Again, if you have questions, you can let me know. And I'm not saying it again and again. Like I have usually, I tend to repeat things a lot, but right now I'm not gonna be able to repeat things a lot because of course I'm tired as well, but also because it's gonna be a very lengthy video and it's gonna be a very complicated video, very complicated class. If I'm going to repeat it again and again, I'll let you sit with these notes, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. But I usually have the tendency to repeat things a lot, which I won't be doing it, because if I repeat things a lot, you will get confused. Because someone told me, it was a constructive feedback, that I repeat things a lot, which makes things even more complicated. So they understand something, and then I explain it again and again, and they stop understanding it. So I will not be explaining it again and again. Again, we talk about Plato. Plato happened from 428 to 348 BCE. Plato was a student and Socrates' most famous student, not just a normal student, but most famous student, and found the academy in Athens. In Athens, he founded the academy, and he gave psychology some of its earliest and most influential theoretical ideas, which we will look at. Plato was very famous, so he gave theory of forms. Plato said that the things we see around us, right? Plato believed that the physical world we see, we can touch the physical things, we can touch our coffee mug, the table we are sitting at. So he said that he basically believed that the physical world we sense is only a shadow of a higher, unchanging world of perfect forms or ideas. So he basically said that whatever we see in the physical world, in this world where everything is physical, we see unchanging world of perfect form and ideas. He basically said that everything seems to be very perfect nowadays. Every idea seems to be very perfect nowadays. And he said true knowledge comes from reasoning about these forms, not from the senses. So he basically said that if you want true knowledge, if you want true wisdom, it will come from reasoning about these forms. It will not come from the senses. So he's like, you have sensory organs, but they will not help you to get true knowledge. What will help you to get true knowledge? The reasoning that you do, right? And the reasoning about these forms, the perfect, unchanging world. Okay. Now we have theory of recollection nativism. Now he said because the soul existed before birth. He said that you are born, but your soul is born before you. So soul is existing before you. And once, so I'll highlight this because it's important. And once knew the forms directly, Plato argued that learning is really a process of remembering knowledge. He basically said that when you learn things, you just don't learn it. You basically remember the knowledge. Your soul remembers it already. And what do I mean by that? What do Plato mean by soul already possesses? Plato argued that learning is a process of remembering knowledge the soul already possesses. It means that your soul, because again he said soul is existing before your birth, the knowledge that you have is already existing, in short. And he gave the concept of nativist. He said that soul is existing before your birth, so whatever information you have is innate. So he talked about the innate information, and he said that you get that information from your soul. You do not get them from experiences, you get it from your soul. And that is why it is very, very important for you to know, because he said soul will give you experience, which means it will be innate. You are born with it. So right now you have a talent of learning different languages, right? You have a talent of um being so good at maths. So if you talk about from the Plato's perspective, Plato would say that it is innate. Your soul knew it. Your soul already had the knowledge of it, and that is why you remember it, because you remember it by birth. But it is not you, it is the soul which is remembering all the information. It is the soul which is remembering it, and you're learning it, and you're born with it, because soul is born before you. Now the tripartite soul. So he wrote the book The Republic, and he said that soul is divided into three parts. He said it is divided into reason. Okay, so he said it is divided into reason, it is divided into spirit, and it is divided into appetite. He said logos located in the head. Your reasoning is located in the head. Whenever you try to do something logical, something rational, you do it from your head. So logic, reasoning, logic, everything that you do practically, you do it from your head, and your information is located in the head. Seek truth and control the other parts. And head is supposed to seek truth. Head is seeking the truth, is not listening to any lie, wants to know the truth of this world, and he's controlling. He means head is controlling other parts as well. So the logical things that you do it from the head, and it is located in the head. So the reasoning part is located in the head. Then he talked about spirit. I hope it is not that complicated. Now, again, it is important for MPhil students. So, Thumas, he called it Thumas. And he said, located in the chest. So, whatever courage and anger you have, it is in your chest. Your emotions are very important, and they're located in the chest, so governs emotion. Your spirit governs emotion such as courage, anger, frustration, and appetite. Appetite is called epithemia. He said it is located in the abdomen, governs bodily desires such as hunger, lust, and sex. Right? So it is located in the abdomen. A just well balanced person is one whom reason rules over spirit and appetite. So he said, if you are a well balanced person, if you are a person with proper moral values, if you are a person who knows how to balance out your life, you would know that you should listen to reasons over spirit and appetite. So spirit and appetite are not that important as reason. Reason is the most important thing. He also believed mind body dualism, that mind and body is different. Plato believes soul is immortal and essentially separate from the and superior to the body. He basically said that soul is superior to the body. It means that your mind and body are separated. So your soul and your body are separated, and he believed in the concept of dualism. I hope you can understand till now, and you can pause the video and take in all this information and then come back. And if you have any doubts, you can let me know. I hope you don't have doubts, but again, if you have doubts, you can let me know. So he was Plato when he said that. And again, I don't want to make it complicated. That's why I'm not repeating it again and again, because I got a constructive feedback and I also realized that when I repeat things, it gets a little complicated. I hope you understand. Okay. If you want me to repeat, I will, but I just don't want to make it tedious for you. Now, Plato's tripartite soul very commonly asked. So, reason here you can see chest, appetite, um, and this is three model of the mind of the soul, which is it, ego, superego, and people often relate it to it, ego, and superego. Right, so they say that like psychoanalysis, like Freud's it, ego, superego, your head, spirit, and appetite is also very similar to psychoanalysis, Freud's three part of the mind, it, ego, superego. So people often relate to it to remember it in a much better way, but it's totally up to you. If you want to relate it, you can. If you don't want to, that's also fine, that's also it's okay. Now we have Aristotle. Who can forget Aristotle? Nobody can forget Aristotle. He's the famous one, and not just the famous, he's also the smartest one, apparently. Aristotle was again Plato's student. So Socrates was a teacher, and Plato was a student of the Socrates, and Aristotle was a student of Plato. So, all of them were kind of related to each other. Not all, but yes, they were related to each other. Now, Aristotle basically was a student of Plato, and just hold on. I think the screen is not visible to some students. I hope it is visible now. Okay. So he disagreed with this teacher, with Plato, right? Aristotle disagreed with Plato on many key points, and is considered by many historians to be the most important figure in psychology before modern era. So before modern era, when modernization of psychology did not happen, people started liking Aristotle more than anyone, and he became not just important but the wiser, most like genuine, full of wisdom. And he also became the wisest, I think. Yeah, apparently people say Aristotle a lot when they think about Greek philosophers. And also, he was a student of Plato. So it's very easy to understand. I should not repeat it again and again. Okay. Now, his book De Anima on the Soul is regarded as the first systematic treatise on psychological topics. So he wrote this book, and it was the first book which people actually read it, and people read it and they found it quite systematic as well. That's all you have to remember, that he wrote this book. So the name of the book is important. And he rejected dualism. So Plato said dualism exists, but he said dualism does not exist. He was a monist. I'll explain you how. Aristotle argued that soul is not a separate substance trapped in the body. He said that soul is not separate. You cannot say that soul is a little different from the body. Soul is the form. So he focused that soul is the form. It means it will be organizing your body, it will be helping you and your body to function of a living body. It could be a body of an animal or a human being or a living being. The soul and body are inseparable. So he said that soul and body cannot be separated. You cannot separate a soul and a body. It is inseparable. It cannot be separated, as the shape of a wax seal is from the wax itself. So you can't basically, in short, separate body and soul. If you are trying to do it, you will be failed, because it's not possible according to Aristotle. And he also said, just like Plato, that we have three important levels of souls, right? So he basically said that you have nutritive soul, right? And he said it is a part of your soul, it is the first level of your soul which is gonna be there for you when it comes to growth and reproduction in animals and humans. So whenever you have sex, whenever you reproduce, whenever you grow, your nutritive soul will play an important role. Now we have the sensitive soul. The sensitive soul will have the movement and sensation which will be in human body and of course in animals as well. And he said rational soul. Rational soul means it will include reason and thought found only in humans. So now I'll give you an example. If you see a cat, the cat will reproduce because it's how they are supposed to do. They don't do it for the enjoyment. They just are supposed to do this to produce babies, and reproduction is not something that you can stop them from doing from an animal, right? So animal will reproduce. You can't tell an animal to not reproduce. And the sensitive soul means that first of all we have the nutritive soul. Nutritive soul means a body of any animal or even human sometimes, but here we are differentiating between humans and animals, that animals will reproduce no matter what happens. Humans are again, they used to do it. Evolutionary theories say that humans used to do reproduction. They used to make offsprings and pass their genes from one to another a person, and this is how the genes used to pass from one generation to another generation. But your nutritive soul said that humans have a choice of not doing it, but animals don't. Most animals actually do it, and most of them are supposed to do it. Humans can do it, and nowadays they don't even do it. So it's totally up to them. Sensitive soul. Sensitive soul means the movement and sensation found in animal and humans. So sensation happens in humans, sensation happens in animals as well, and movement as well. And he said rational. So humans can think logically, but animals can't think logically. If you tell an animal to think logically, will it be possible? It won't be possible. So he said the rational soul is only in humans and not in animals. So in only in human beings, but not in living beings. An animal cannot think rationally, cannot think logically, and that is why it is only there in humans. It only happens in humans. Only humans possess it. Now he also talked about empiricism. Now empiricism is very very important because he said he believed that all knowledge begins with sensory experience. He said that whatever knowledge you get from your sensory organs, you experience them. The mind at birth is like a blank slate. Now again, you remember tabula rasa, right? John Locke. So he said the mind at birth is like a blank slate on which experience, right? So he said that you're born with a blank slate, just like tabula rasa, and every experience that you have in your life, every different kind of adventures you do, different kinds of experiences you get in your life is written on that blank slate. And he basically said that is why your human body at birth is like a blank slate, because every experiences that you have is written on a blank slate. So it is not by birth. You do experience a lot of things and then it is written eventually on the blank slate when you die. This directly opposed Plato's nativism. Nativism basically means innate. So he said no, innate is not possible because blank slate is already there. You get experiences, nothing is there with you since birth. He basically said it. And anticipates means expects, the empiricist philosophers of the 1600s and 1700s, which means he actually believed in empiricism, which means he believed that we get experiences and nothing is innate. I hope this is clear to you. I want to take a pause for a while. I'll pause this video, this class, but if you want, I can continue. I don't know. I wish it was live so that you tell me that it's getting too much, it's getting overwhelming, but I hope it doesn't. Okay. Now we have law of association, which is also given by one and only Aristotle. So I'll not write it down because we're talking about him anyway, so you would know that it is given by Aristotle. Law of association, laws of association. Aristotle proposed that we remember and connect ideas according to three principles. He said, with similarity, you have ideas, you remember and connect with ideas, with contiguity, and with association and contrast. So he basically said that you learn things and you connect with ideas with these three things: first, similarity; second, contrast; and third, contiguity. So he focused on these three laws. Just like Plato, he has laws. Now he said similarity. Similarity means thinking of one thing reminds of another something similar. So thinking of one cat, it will remind you of your cat. It could be the best example. Thinking of your pet dog will remind you of another pet dog. or thinking of your mom's food, it would be reminding of something else. So again, he said that you actually link with things. One thing, if it is too similar, it will make you remember something that is very much similar to that one particular thing. Maybe you saw a face of your ex in the crowd and you remembered your ex, so it was of course very much similar to the face of your ex. Again, I don't want to make you sad. Let's not talk about it, of course. If someone is going through breakup, I'm really sorry. Now let's talk about contrast. It reminds us of its opposite, right? Contrast means if something is different from something that you already know, then it would be a part of contrast. It would remind you of something that is opposite than that. Maybe someone is treating their daughter not right, and your father has treated you very nicely, your father has taken care of you, it would remind you of that this is happening and I am remembering something opposite than this, right? Maybe someone is in a relationship and it is making you think of something opposite, that oh, you are single. So that is contrast. So he basically said that contrast is, it reminds us of its opposite. Whenever you see something, it will remind you of the opposite part of it, opposite side of it. Similarity is when something reminds you of something similar, and contiguity basically means things experienced together in time or space become linked in memory. So whatever you experience in time or space, it will be stored in your memory. So I can say it will be stored in your memory, but again, it's not innate. So like the theorist said, other theorist, he said that uh you know, you have the soul and your soul already remembers it, so it's innate. But this theorist did not say that. He said that no, you experience things and then it gets stored in a memory eventually. And these are three laws of association that Aristotle gave and which are important. I hope this is easy for you to remember. I hope you don't have any problem. And then important error. Okay, shit. I think there was an error. I wrote it down, but I forgot, guys. I'm really sorry. So Aristotle did not believe in brain, he believed in heart. He said that the thought, sensation, and emotion comes from your heart. He did not say brain. I'm really sorry. And that brain's function was simply to cool the blood. So I thought it's the opposite. And not me, actually. I think I asked these notes from Claude AI and he did an error. So I'll again tell you to please edit your notes. If you're writing notes with me, you just need to edit it a little bit. He did not focus on brain, he actually focused on mind. Um, he did focus on heart, sorry. So yeah, so you need to please make sure that you're not writing the wrong notes. I want you to remember that he focused on heart, not the brain. And he said that brain will cool the blood and heart will make all the thoughts and sensation and emotion possible. And yeah, so please remember that it was not brain, it was heart. Okay, I'm really sorry for the mistake that I did. And he basically said that brain will be responsible for that, for cooling down the blood. Heart will not be responsible. Heart will be responsible for all the functions that will happen, like sensation, thought, feelings. Okay. Then we have Hippocrates. Sorry, I was saying happy. Then we have Hippocrates, and after these two, we will start with medieval period from the next class. I'm really sorry for any error that happened, but please just remember it and make sure your notes are updated. Now, Hippocrates and the four humors. Now, Hippocrates happened from this and this. You don't have to remember it. Of course, he's important. You can, but you don't have to. It's okay. Father of medicine, he was called because he said that if you have any mental illness as well as physical illness, it will be gone away with medicines. It is not because of any possession by God or curses or any ghost. He said ghost does not give you any mental illness, gods don't give you any mental illness, or they don't possess you. It is not possible. And he was thinking in a very scientific way. It was all science for him towards natural biological causes, a hugely important step for psychology and medicine, because he actually said that no, it is not because of any supernatural causes. It could be God, it could be ghost, a spirit. It is definitely not because of any god, spirits, or whatever. And then he proposed that body contains four fluids. He said, again, very similar to the things we just studied: water, sorry, no, but yeah, water, earth, fire, blood. So he also said that we have four humors. We have blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm, which is also called cough. Phlegm is called cough, and a person's personality is dependent on what kind of humor is more dominated in his or her body. Hippocrates is also credited with clearly stating the brain is the organ of the mind. Now here it is correct. There is no error in this. The only error was in the Aristotle one, and he said that the brain is the organ of the mind. He said everything that happens in a mind is controlled by the brain, and it is responsible for sensation, thought, and emotion. And it's the other way around for Aristotle. Aristotle said that it is heart which is doing all the important things, sensation, thought, and emotions, and Hippocrates said it's the brain. So it was more scientific than Aristotle, and he was also important. And Galen in 129 to 160, he expanded. So Galen expanded into a four personality temperament that is called sanguine, melancholic, choleric, and phlegmatic. And I'm assuming that you're from psychology background. You do not need me to give a brief on this, but if you want, you can let me know. But I don't think so. I should. Okay, now we have the Hellenistic schools, right? After Aristotle, in the Hellenistic period, from 300 BC onward, two schools of philosophy offered practical guidance for living well. So they offered practical guidance, and both had ideas about emotion and well-being. And they both talk about psychology and modern psychotherapy. And there were two important concepts: stoicism, I don't know how to pronounce this. Stoicism, I'll be calling it. And it was founded by Zeno of Citium. And it said that disturbing emotion come not from events but from a judgment and belief from about those events. So he basically said that you have disturbing emotions and disturbing thoughts. It is not happening from events. So you saw an accident, it is not happening because of that accident, it is happening from the judgment and beliefs about that accident. So he said your judgments and beliefs shape you, not the events. And that a wise person achieves peace by mastering reason over passion. So he said that if you're wise, then you would basically achieve peace, relaxation by mastering reason. He said you should not focus on passion, you should focus on reason, logic. This idea directly foreshadows cognitive model used in cognitive behavioral therapy. It is not the events upset you, but how view them. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, we try to change the um, view of that person, that it is not because of that particular thing, it is because you are feeling in that way. So your belief, your judgments are affecting you, and that is why it is very much related to the cognitive behavioral therapy that you have to understand about. Then you have Epicureanism. It is founded by Epicurus, from this to this, and thought that school of life is calm, moderate, pleasure, and freedom from mental disturbance. That is called atraxia, achieved through simple living, rational reflection rather than indulgence. So he basically, in short, said that if you want to achieve your life in a good way, if you want to find pleasure in your life, if you want calm, moderate pleasure and freedom from all the mental disturbance, from all the mental illness, pressure, you have to live a simple life. So he focused on living a very simple life, in short. And who was the person? Epicurus. And what was this philosophy called? Because we are studying about philosophies in history, Epicureanism. And he said if you want to live a life without any problems, mental problems specifically, because we're studying psychology. He said you have to live simple life and rational. Again, I'll mention it here, logical life. You have to think through logical aspects, not through emotional aspects. If you want calm, moderate, pleasure, freedom, a kind of mental life, right, where you do not have any mental problem, then you need to live a simple and rational reflection rather than indulgence. So don't indulge in it, just live, reflect. You don't have to indulge in simple living and rational life, you just have to reflect towards it. In short, live a normal life, simple life, think logically, and it will help you to get rid of all the mental disturbances that you might have, which is called ataxia, right? And now we have thinkers. You have to remember the core ideas, not just the dates. If you want to, you can, but it's no pressure, you don't have to remember it. If you want to remember, it's okay, but we have these thinkers that we talked about in today's video, Socratic and pre-Socratic, and we have these important figures. Now in the next video we will be talking about the medieval period. That will be important. So just let me know if you have any doubts. Till now, and next class, which is part 2, it will be about the medieval period. And it will be about a lot of religious aspects that happened in psychology, religion related things. And I think this is enough for today. I'm happy I made this video. I always wanted to talk about these topics. It is interesting, and it will make you think a lot of things. It will give you a lot of perspectives in psychology. Thank you for watching it.